Welcome to MS Office Hours Special Edition. This is actually a re-recorded session of the M365 storage and licensing changes for education customers that we actually had Bill come on and present on August 17th. Today is August 31st. So thank you, Bill, for making the time to come back and re-record this. We had a brief issue with the recording, so we wanted to get all of this information out to everyone. So definitely appreciate you making the time to come back and redo this with us and get it posted out publicly for everyone else. So with that, I'll just kick it straight to you and you can go through it all again.
Outstanding. Yeah, appreciate that, Garrett. Hey, everyone. I'm Bill Sluss. I'm a product manager with the Microsoft Education team. I focus on a broad set of IT admin related product development, but today we're going to talk about the latest storage and licensing changes that were announced on August 1st of 2023. So with that, quick agenda run through. I'm going to give you kind of a high level summary of all of the various changes that we announced. I'm also going to cover some corresponding tooling that tie back to those changes, because one of the things that we noticed about these storage changes is that there were some gaps in our tooling portfolio to help customers manage and work within those changes. And then at the end, I'll share a slide that has a bunch of helpful links that you can go and learn more after the fact. And because this is the re-recording, we actually won't be doing a full Q&A, but maybe we'll do some between Garrett and myself. So with that, let's dive right in. So I'm going to talk about three specific changes today. And the first of which is this one. A1 Plus is a license that we've had in existence for about the last 6-7 years. A lot of customers have A1 Plus licenses in their tenant. And we have announced that A1 Plus will be expiring and removed from M365 a year from that announced date. So August 1st, 2024, A1 Plus licenses will be going away. So any and all admins should prepare for this change. If you're not familiar, go and check, see if you have A1 Plus licenses, if they're assigned out. We'll talk more about how to do that. But August 1st, 2024, A1 Plus goes away. Now, if you have users that have the A1 Plus license assigned, they will automatically be moved to the standard A1 license for you. Should you not take any proactive measures and go ahead and update those users to another SKU, another license, we will do that for you. It will happen in the background on that expiry date. Users will be moved to the standard A1 SKU. However, if the user is assigned, say, an A3, an A5, another one of the core SKU bundles, those license assignments will persist, and the A1 Plus license will just disappear. We would encourage everyone to go out and review their users and proactively make those changes to whatever license you want. That way you can sort of control the timing and communication out to end users and do it when you see fit. But should you not do anything, we will automatically move all of your users that are running an A1 Plus license over to that A1 SKU, unless they have another SKU that supersedes it. Now, what you need to know about that difference is if you look at the A1 Plus license and the standard Office 365 A1 license, the core difference between them is the desktop app. So A1 Plus, it includes the M365 apps for desktop, meaning all of the desktop clients, your Teams, Outlook, all of those desktop apps that we all know and love, those are included in A1 Plus. And they are not included in the standard Office 365 A1. And so as you think about this change, if you don't leverage or utilize and share with your user population that those desktop apps, you don't deploy them out, you don't provide access, no change or communication is needed. But if you are running those desktop apps, we would encourage to communicate with your end user population to let them know that these changes are coming and how to actually take advantage of and leverage the web applications going forward, because those desktop apps are going away. Now, of course, should you need to continue use of those desktop apps, they are still included in our other license packages like the A3 and the A5 SKU bundles, but the standard A1, those will not be there. You can continue to use mobile, web, but not the desktop apps on that standard A1. So that's the core difference in those two SKUs. And so if that matters for you and your organization, take action accordingly. Now, as I mentioned, we would encourage every admin out there running an education tenant to go and just check to see if your users are actually assigned an A1 license. Sometimes these things are assigned out, they're conflated with the standard A1. You don't even realize that they're actually assigned. They've been assigned for years and that sort of thing. So the easiest way to check is if you go into the M365 Admin Center and you drill down to the billing tab on the left-hand navigation, there's going to be a subheading for your products. And if you go in there, you can very quickly see if you have any A1 plus licenses in your tenant. In this example, you can see the two at the bottom there. I've got both A1 plus for faculty and A1 plus for students. And it also quickly tells me if I have any license assignments for those particular SKUs. And so in this example, it shows 818 at the A1 plus for faculty and 900 plus for the student licenses. And so from there, once you've identified that you actually have some portion of your user population assigned to these SKUs, the next step would be to go over to the users tab in the M365 Admin Center. So if you go to users and you go to active users, you can create a filter and then you can associate that filter with just the particular A1 plus license. So I can select my A1 plus for faculty and I can create that filter and I'll get the short list effectively of all of the users, just the subset of users that have that A1 plus license assigned. I can do the same thing for my A1 plus for students license. And the great new feature in the Admin Center is that you can also, once you apply that filter, you can export those to CSV and you can look at them in more detail, potentially run and leverage that information for PowerShell scripting or however you want to manage those corresponding license updates. So those are the two steps to encourage for the A1 plus license expiry change. Now, the other two changes that I'm going to talk about are very specific to limits within M365, limits or quotas, as they're often referred to. Now, in our platform, we have a variety of limits. Like there are a ton of limits that exist today, and they sort of break down along these three lines. You have user level limits, where if I'm a user and I have, say, a particular license, or maybe it applies to any user of a particular type, these limits just apply to the user. They don't affect other users in the tenant potentially because they might have different licenses. So things like your mailbox size or the number of messages sent per minute, the OneDrive size that you can have as an individual user. Those things are all user level limits. We also support a concept, and there's a bunch of documentation out on it. And if you haven't seen it, you should familiarize with these service level limits. So within each application service in M365, there are almost always going to be some set of limitations with the service. A lot of times these are tied to scale or capabilities within the service to service large organizations. So as an example, SharePoint, they limit to 2 million sites per organization, and there's a default service limit of 250 gig file upload. Right? These are just examples to sort of paint the picture, but most applications and services in M365 have a documented page for service level limits. And then we also have this concept of tenant limits, things that apply broadly to the tenant. They apply to all users in the tenant, regardless of license. And these are things like the domain configuration. You can only have up to 5,000 domains, or there's a core Azure AD object limit. You can only have up to 300,000, and there's a process to extend that, but it's a tenant level limit. It applies to everyone broadly. And so what I'm going to talk about today is both a user level limit, a new user level limit, and then a new tenant level limit, which actually spans a variety of services, and you'll see what I mean in just a minute. And both of these limits are associated to storage. So the first one that I want to cover is for A1 users specifically. This is the user level limit. So any user that has an Office 365 A1 SKU assigned to them, also including the Office 365 A1 Plus SKU, those users starting February 1st, 2024 will receive a 100 gig max limit for their OneDrive. Today, the limit extends up to 25 terabytes. That will be reduced to a 100 gig max limit for OneDrive. And so while IT won't be able to extend beyond that 100 gig, they can always decrease it. So 100 gig is a max limit. It doesn't mean that everyone has to get 100 gig. If you want to set some users to 10 gigs or 50 gigs or anywhere in between, you could do that. It just cannot exceed 100 gigs starting on February 1st, 2024. And so any user, in much the same way that OneDrive limits work today, IT admins control the limits in their tenant. If a user exceeds their limit, their OneDrive becomes a read-only OneDrive. So they won't be able to add any new content, create new documents, and that sort of thing if they hit or exceed that limit that is set. And again, 100 gig max for A1. And so if users need more than that 100 gig limit, then of course you can move up to the A3 or A5 SKU bundles that we support. And they support up to 25 terabyte. And if you look at the documentation, it can be a little bit confusing. I'll try to explain it quickly. Basically, a lot of the documentation will reference unlimited storage. At least historically, it would reference unlimited storage. I believe that has all since changed. But the way it works is that you get an initial 1 terabyte for every new OneDrive that's created. There's actually a setting in OneDrive where you can configure the default OneDrive allocation as you create new OneDrives. But that one terabyte can be extended up to 5 terabytes. And then anything past 5 terabytes has to go through an approval and granting process, where basically you have to be within 90% of your 5 terabyte threshold. Then you submit to Office 365 support a request to increase. You can only increase up to 25 terabytes. That's actually a service level limit of the OneDrive service. No OneDrive can exceed 25 terabytes. Beyond that, you can leverage things like team site storage and that sort of thing. But 25 terabytes is the max capacity for any user OneDrive in both education and commercial. But the change here is that for A1 users specifically, 100 gig max limit on their OneDrives. Now, the next change that I'm going to talk about is a little bit more complex. The user level limit is straightforward. We are introducing a new concept in M365 education tenants called pooled storage. And other platforms have similar concepts you may be familiar with. But what this means is basically within M365, we have a variety of applications that provide storage out to the end user population, to all of your users within the tenant boundary. And for us, the core storage locations are SharePoint, OneDrive, and Exchange. And what we're doing is we're taking all of the storage across all of those core services, and we're providing a calculation of how much consumption you have across each of those 3 core services. And the nuance is important about how we count consumption across these 3 services to create the total storage pool within the tenant. And so within SharePoint, it's all SharePoint sites. Every single SharePoint site that exists will count against that pooled storage consumption metric and limit that we're going to talk about in just a second. And then also all SharePoint storage. So SharePoint's moving to a model where it will support both additional first-party and third-party applications to leverage SharePoint storage behind the scenes for first-party and third-party applications outside of the SharePoint UI that you know today. So you can bring your own app to SharePoint effectively, or things like Loop or Stream that leverage underlying SharePoint storage, right? All of those things in aggregate will count as consumption against this pooled storage model. Syntax Archive is the one exception that has been announced. That Syntax Archive isn't released yet. I believe that's planned for Q4 this year to be released, but stay tuned for more information on Syntax Archive. But Syntax Archive will not count against pooled storage. So if you're thinking about an archive solution for your SharePoint storage content that exists there today, Syntax Archive will be a really interesting option as that is released later this year. Everything in OneDrive counts. So every single OneDrive in your tenant will count and contribute to this pooled storage consumption model. And in exchange, there is some nuance here that matters a lot. So user mailboxes will count against the pooled storage limit. Shared mailboxes and group mailboxes will also count against your pooled storage total consumption and limit. What will not count are things like archive mailboxes, public folders, and other mailbox types like discovery mailboxes. There are a few others. The one big call out here I think that matters most is the archive mailboxes. So we would continue to encourage enabling archive mailboxes within Exchange to mitigate storage bloat within Exchange. So if you enable archive mailboxes, anything and everything that is archived in those archive mailbox locations will not count against your pooled storage quota and model. So keep that in mind. And if you're not enabled for archiving today, we would encourage that you do that going forward, should you need that additional space in your pool. And so that's how we sort of measure consumption. But how does the pooled storage limit actually get calculated on a per tenant basis? And this is where I think a lot of questions exist out there for customers. And so I'm going to walk through this. Basically, every single tenant that we hand out in education will start with 100 terabytes. Every single one. This will be free of charge. We will continue to provide this free of charge going forward. 100 terabytes, every single tenant. On top of that 100 terabytes, then you start adding paid SKUs. Okay, so there are a ton of different SKUs or licenses inside of M365 tenants. Sometimes there are tenants that might have just one or two. Other tenants might have 100 different types of licenses within their tenant. And so we have a great resource that's available that has all of the different SKU contributions. You can go to aka.ms/edu storage SKU, and you can pull down the full listing of SKU contributions. I tried to highlight some of the ones that are the most critical here. So if you have an A5 SKU, so O365 A5, M365 A5, you get an extra 100 gigs for each one of those paid licenses in your tenant that are present on top of that free 100 terabytes. We're also doing the same for E5, M365 E5, O365 E5, you get an extra 100 gigs on top of that initial default 100 terabyte storage. At the A3 level, so O365 A3, M365 A3, you get an extra 50 gigs for every one of those licenses that you purchase specifically in your tenant. Those contribute on top of the 100 terabyte default storage. You don't have to have those licenses assigned. Just paying for them, having them present within the tenant as an active status, they will of course count. There's also this concept of licenses that go into a grace period. Those will also count until they move to an expired or disabled state. So A3, 50 gigs, A5, 100 gigs. Now, we also have an MA1 SKU, so M365A1, which is different than the Office 365A1. At the MA1 level, you'll get an extra 10 gigs for each one of those paid licenses. And then when you get down to the free tier, I want to clarify what free means. So Office 365A1 SKUs, you will get a 0 gig contribution on top of the 100 gigs. So they don't add anything on top. Also, student use benefit SKUs. This is a big question that we get. Student use benefit SKUs do not contribute on top of the 100 terabyte pooled storage limit. And then alumni SKUs, that's something we commonly see in higher ed. So 0 gig contribution on top of the default 100 gig. Beyond this, we're also introducing this new concept of storage packs. So those haven't been released yet. Those are coming soon. And we will sell those for $300 a month at 10 terabytes. So you can get as much storage as you possibly want or need, but it's no longer free to get that unlimited storage and capacity. So 10 terabytes, $300 a month for the storage packs when we release them later this year. Looking at just a quick example, here's a sample customer. They, of course, start with their 100 terabytes of default storage. And this customer in particular, they have 10,000 MA5 for faculty licenses, right? These are paid SKUs. So they've got 10,000 of them, and each one of those licenses adds 100 gigs to their pooled storage. So the calculation there is they get an extra million gigabyte on top of their 100 terabytes that they initially have. For MA3, they have 20,000 MA3, 50 gigs per. That's also an additional 1 million gigs on top. They have some student use benefit and OA1s, but those don't contribute anything. And so for this customer in particular, their total pooled storage limit is just over 2 million gigabytes. That will be the pooled storage limit. And that's based on consumption across Exchange, SharePoint, and OneDrive, those storage locations that I painted out. Now, this seems complicated. We're going to give you some tools to actually help you understand what you have in your tenant. So I'm going to walk through those quickly. So the first tools that are available, they're available today. At the time of this recording, we have the ability to view the storage consumption and view the storage limit. That limit is not enforced yet. Again, enforcement doesn't go into effect for this pooled storage model until August 1st, 2024. So you have just right around a year to actually take action and do something before that pooled storage limit goes into effect. And then on August 1st, so about a month from the point in time of this recording, we're also introducing OneDrive end user management, new UI to actually improve the experience for end users to clean up and manage their own storage. We'll showcase large files and the largest files that they have so they can easily find and delete those files. It'll also give an indication of where they're at relative to the quota set by IT. So more similar to what you find on the consumer side in the OneDrive experience, we're bringing that into the education OneDrive web experience. We're also introducing group-based management for OneDrive for IT admins. And so today there is a base default limit that you can configure, which effectively applies to all users as you create their OneDrives. They'll have a default limit. We wanted to make that more modular in its approach. And so in much the same way that you can do things like group-based licensing as an example, you'll be able to pick a group, set a corresponding OneDrive limit, and then all users within that group that exist or are ever added to that group will get that and inherit that limit that you set. And then we're also working on a story around inactive user reporting. We don't have definitive dates for that yet, but let's take a look at a few of these really quick. So the first one that I talked about is the view storage capability here. We've got a UI. It will be in your M365 Admin Center. So if you drill down on the left-hand nav underneath your Reports tab, you may have to click the Show All option down at the bottom to find the Reports tab. But underneath the Reports, you'll see a new storage heading. And within there, you'll find both your total consumption across OneDrive, Exchange, and SharePoint. And then you'll find your total limit, your projected limit, because we're not actually enforcing it yet. And so you'll very quickly get a snapshot of where you stand relative to this new pooled storage limit. Within this same page, you'll also notice that there are 3 tabs sort of in the middle, OneDrive, Exchange, and SharePoint listed. And there are reports underneath each of them. So if you click on the OneDrive option here, you'll quickly get a listing of your top 1,000 OneDrive sites that exist within your environment. If you click on the Exchange tab, you'll get your top 1,000 Exchange mailboxes, and the same thing for corresponding SharePoint sites. So these are effective to, if you're in a scenario where you're looking at your overall pooled storage, you find that I really need to start enforcing limits, or I need to think about how to actually clean up some storage and and manage things in a slightly different way. This is a great way to get a quick look at top consumers across your environment. More often than not, in these large organizations that are approaching or exceeding their pooled storage limit, they have a handful of sites or mailboxes or OneDrives most commonly that are the top consumers, and so those are sort of low-hanging fruit or targets to go and engage with to facilitate some level of cleanup. Maybe you want to leverage something like archive storage for those locations, or look at Azure-based storage solutions, or maybe you just don't need the content anymore, right? Depending on your case, but this will quickly let you know where the biggest consumers are in your environment. And the other thing that I mentioned that will be out at the end of September, starting October 1st, you'll see the OneDrive group-based management. So in the same location in the M365 Admin Center, you'll see the managed storage option. You click on OneDrive, and when you go to set limits, it's really straightforward. You simply pick a group, whichever and these are AAD security groups. You then associate a specific limit to that group based on total number of gigabyte. And once you click save, then the process loops through and it will apply that limit to any and all users within that group. And as you add new users to the group, they will also inherit that same limit. So pretty straightforward setup, big improvement over what we have today with just a single default limit that applies to all users, help facilitate bulk management for large organizations and small. The same. As I mentioned earlier, there is a ton of documentation on what we just published and announced. And so these are the core aka.ms links. If you want to learn more about any of these core feature sets, and I would encourage reading up the Office 365 service description, education service description, specifically has this pooled storage model laid out. So if you want to go read about it in more detail, I would encourage checking out the Office 365 service description. We have click-throughs there. There's a ton of great content out there. So with that, I will stop and turn it back to Garrett.
Yeah, that was awesome, Bill. Thank you so much for reviewing all of that again. Are you okay doing a couple of quick Q&As that just to clear up some things? So I know that I've had some conversations with customers and a few things have popped up. So one of those that has popped up is litigation or legal holds with users' mailboxes that might be an archive. How does that impact, or is there any impact with the pooled storage limits or anything like that? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned before that we are not counting storage for anything that's in the archive mailbox. And when you think about litigation hold or legal hold in Exchange, that will be applied to both the user's primary mailbox and the archive mailbox. And so anything that exists in the primary mailbox, should that legal hold be applied, that will count against pooled storage. Anything that exists in the archive mailbox that's been moved out to the archive mailbox, either through end user action or through automation and policy, that can be on legal hold indefinitely. That will not count against your pooled storage limit. And so that is the key difference to know there.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Great explanation. The second one is, we know that these storage limits are applying to OneDrive, SharePoint, Exchange, right? But we also have a lot of customers that are using Teams. And as you know, Teams is kind of backed by these SharePoint sites. So one customer actually asked me, I thought it was a great question, Teams chats, how does that come into play with storage, right? Do you wanna take that one?
Sure. Yeah. So chats don't actually get stored against the SharePoint site. They have their own independent storage within Teams directly. So you can chat all day and as much as you want. None of that content will count against your pooled storage limit. However, the caveat is any files that are shared within the context of a given site or chat do get stored in SharePoint. So if you're thinking any file storage that occurs within the context of Teams is backed by SharePoint storage. And so any files that get added in the context of chats or meetings or anything like that, then you're looking at Team sites or OneDrive sites. And so files will count, but the chats themselves, just the text-based chats, those will not count.
Okay, Perfect. Really, really good. I think that's important to call out, especially for meetings like with meeting recordings, right? As we know, those typically store to the user's OneDrive if it's a one-on-one meeting, and then a separate location for channel meetings. And so I called that out specifically, and I'm glad you mentioned the files because that it's just interesting, and we need to remember that those files will count against because those are stored up in either SharePoint or OneDrive. And then I think you've answered all of the questions that I've got. What I'm going to do is you shared that list of links. I'm going to put those into the recording. This is going to be posted on YouTube, so all of those will be posted in the description below, along with the service limits. And you also had shared some storage quota scripts that you could go run against an environment and see the usage of those. So I've got all of that compiled together. So I'll get that listed in the description. So if you're watching, you should be able to go visit those links that Bill chatted about. And then if there are additional questions, reach out to the MS Office Hours team. If you aren't a part of the team yet, go to aka.ms/office hours edu. You'll see a list of all of the education office hours that we offer. There's a link to join the MS Office Hours teams, and we do have the ability for you to join a team and interact with other education customers throughout. So if there's any additional questions, you can go into the community channel. There's a community questions channel that you can post additional questions to, and we'll get those answered as best we can. So Bill, thank you so much again for re-recording this with us. Definitely appreciate you doing that. Super great information for our customers to know. And thank you again for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Awesome.